Good morning and welcome, everyone. My name is Ashley Abdullah, and I'm Director of Marketing for eMerge Americas. On behalf of my entire team, we thank you for joining us this morning for this morning's virtual masterclass entitled Innovation and Security in the Cloud, presented by AWS. Note that the format of today's session is an interactive masterclass. You'll have the opportunity to engage with our presenters via our Q&A session. But we encourage you to also get involved in the class discussion. So we invite you to submit your comments or questions in the chat box and the Q&A portal. Please note that we're recording today's session so as to stream to a larger audience, and the recording will later be made available so as to watch on demand. To open our event, please join me in giving a warm welcome to the President of eMerge Americas, Melissa Medina.
Thanks, Ashley. Hi, Merritt. Good morning to everybody.
Hello.
I want to welcome everyone in the audience to today's virtual panel. As Ashley mentioned, my name is Melissa Medina, and I'm the President of eMerge Americas, a tech platform that connects the dots between startups, investors, higher ed, corporate enterprises, and government officials, all for one objective: to spur investment and innovation across the Americas and to help create a sustainable and thriving tech hub for the Americas here in South Florida. To this end, each year we host an annual global event, the eMerge Americas Tech Conference, which convenes more than 16,000 attendees from over 40 countries. Our next global conference is set to take place at the Miami Beach Convention Center on April 18th and 19th, 2022. So please mark your calendars. In and outside of the event, we create and curate content and resources for entrepreneurs, investors, and our entire ecosystem in tech and venture. And that's why today's masterclass presented by our partners at AWS couldn't be any more timely. Cloud is an innovation enabler for enterprises of all sizes. Innovative shops need to move to an agile development pipeline where security is woven into the fabric. Today, we're going to learn about how to innovate securely, how cloud has transformed the ability to work and security at scale, what AWS thinks about the North Stars of innovation and security, and how you can harness the power of cloud to further your mission. To kick off today's masterclass, we're joined by Merritt Baer. Merritt is a principal in the office of the CISO at AWS. In her role, she provides technical cloud security guidance to complex regulated organizations like the Fortune 100 and advises the leadership of AWS's largest customers on security as a bottom line proposition. Merritt has experience in all three branches of government and the private sector. Before Amazon, she served as lead cyber advisor to the Federal Communications Commission. She has also served at the US Department of Homeland Security, the Office of US Senator Michael Bennet, and the US Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces. Incredible. Before joining the government, Merritt started a business advisory legal practice working with emerging tech companies. Based in Miami, Florida, although she's in Colorado today, she is the founder of Women's Tech Expert Network, Tech and Roses, adjunct professor of cybersecurity at the University of Maryland, a mother, and a boxer. Yes, you heard that right, a boxer. Welcome, Merritt. Before we kick off your masterclass, which I'm very, very excited for, I thought we could get to know you a little bit more. First and foremost, Merritt, it's been a challenging 18 months or so, I'd say, for everyone due to the global pandemic. How are you and your family faring through these, what I would call difficult times over the last 18 months or so?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I had a baby right at the beginning of the pandemic, so it's been an odd time. It's almost hard to separate all of the craziness from each other. So it's been, a new normal, I guess, as they say. But I mostly feel like I'm really grateful that I'm in Miami most of the time, which means that I can be outside a lot. Just getting outside and you see the ocean and you feel better. But none of us have like the magic solution to feeling okay during a global pandemic. Like we all just get by, right?
Definitely.
What do you think? You have 5 kids and you're living through it. How's it going for you?
Yeah, I'd say, similar. It's the beginning when all the kids were
really grateful that I'm in Miami most of the time.
Sorry, heard a recording there. But no, similar, I guess trying to adjust to what everyone's calling, this new normal, definitely difficult in the beginning, but I'd say, and I'm sure you agree, that there are silver linings that we have sort of all found throughout this pandemic, which is like more quality time with family and friends. And like you said, really getting to enjoy the outdoors. Merritt, definitely want to double click on you being a boxer. It stood out to me. You are a powerhouse in, many different aspects of your life. And when I read that, I just, please tell us a little more about that journey, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I grew up being a really serious soccer player, and then I had 5 knee surgeries. And boxing is actually one of those things that I think people have the misconception that it is like getting your aggression out or something. Actually, it's really controlled, right? It's more like a mix of physics and dance. You're trying to exert the most concussive force without having to exert as much energy. And to do that, you have to have really strong form and really kind of disciplined ways to create that force. And so I found it really interesting, sort of like learning a language, because you can feel when you get better at it, like when your movements get more kind of effective. And so I just found it really, I also kind of missed having a coach in my life, someone who doesn't know anything about me except when I show up at the gym. And I just thought that was a healthy thing to have. For all of us have like more than one side to ourselves. And I think that can be a little bit of a relief to just like not be consumed by, all the other things that go on, and to have some part of your day when like you can't afford to be thinking about other stuff when you're boxing, or you'll get hit.
Where you actually disconnect.
Yeah. So you just, you're forced to be really immediate. And I really love that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I can imagine that it helps provide much more of like a healthy balance in life as well, and that you could apply a lot of those techniques into your personal and professional life as well.
Yeah, I think that fascinating. I'm not a big believer in balance, because I think we're all more than 100% of one thing. You know what I mean? But yeah, I do think that it can be helpful to just like have parts of yourself that you can work on that are separate from one another, so that you are, you're, by definition, you get some frame of reference or some, coming down to earth. You will, go meet someone who doesn't care what you do in your day job, and that can be healthy, I think.
Absolutely. And I agree with you that I think the search for the eternal balance in life that's just a mystery. I mean, every day, the struggle is real, and you figure out what your priorities are, and you focus on that day. In my opinion, if you're searching for full balance,
exactly,
it's tough.
Yeah, there's no such thing as having it all, right? We all just kind of pick what we can do right here that is our priority. And I think, acknowledging that and living with that reality, like the most finite resource is our time, right? And so knowing that and kind of finding 100%. Ways to work within that constraint and do the stuff that's a priority.
Definitely. Thanks, Merritt. It's been fun getting to know you a little bit more, and for the audience to get to know you a little better as well. Now I'm going to turn it over to you to teach us about innovation and security in the cloud. I'm really looking forward to it, and looking forward to the Q&A afterwards as well.
Awesome. Yes. Thanks for the back and forth. I will see you in a few. And audience members, feel free to put your questions in the chat throughout. We'll have some time at the end for questions, and feel free to be as interactive as you feel like as we go. So let me dig in here. So as we mentioned, my name is Merritt Baer. I am a principal in the Office of the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer at AWS, Amazon Web Services, which is the cloud. So here's my contact info. Feel free to follow me, send me a note if you have questions and follow-ons, or if you're interested in working for us. So first of all, what is cloud, right? This is the security shared responsibility model, but really it's also just the premise of cloud, that your cloud provider takes care of those bottom layers of the stack. So, the concrete floor, guards and gates, up through layer 4, the hypervisor, and that then those top layers, the software layers, are the ones that you, the customer, have the responsibility for and also are free to build within. And the reason that you have responsibility for it from a security perspective is that this is really a toolkit where you can do a lot of different things. So you could be, running compute or analytics, you could be running or using storage or database capabilities, and only you really know what you're doing on the platform. So that being said, of course, with managed services, sometimes we're going further up those layers of the stack. But generally speaking, this is kind of what we're talking about when we say cloud. And of course, ultimately, even though we have taken away from you the pain point of having to maintain those bottom layers of the stack, we have to do it. So this is what it looks like. This map changes all the time. I have to go double check this morning that this is up to date. But we have tons of points of presence in the form of availability zones and then regions. A region is composed of multiple availability zones. And these are, intentionally built with fully isolated infrastructure, meaningful separation, unique power, in rack, hundreds of thousands at scale, and these data centers are connected with fully redundant and isolated metro fiber, fully meshed and redundant networking, all of which is just to say that, in the conception of security, we think of it as, well, one common tool to think of it is as CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So the confidentiality and integrity, so that would take the form of things like encryption and validation. Those get a lot of attention, but I think we should be paying attention a lot of times to that availability element too. So as we think about innovation at scale, doing that in a way that is really effective means that one of the big metrics you'll have is like whether you're available, whether your infrastructure is up, and whether your customers are able to access it. And from the conversations I have with customers, their on-prem availability is often something like 99%. Is that good? Well, that means you have 14 down minutes a day. Seems like a little or a lot, depending on how crucial your operations are. And I think most folks are really looking for as high availability as they can get. So this is one of the inheritances that you get in terms of security on a cloud platform, and specifically on AWS. So again, this is one of those areas that you don't think about as the customer, but we have custom hardware that we have invested in. So it has a lot of attributes that are security related, or that are security benefits that you inherit. And these are just things that I mentioned sort of in the background under those layers of the stack. You are not having to engineer these, but we have. And one of the big inheritances, again, to that availability moment is the live updates. So no downtime, no reboot. Our Nitro system is really impressive. If you have time, go look up more about this. It's just super interesting to me. And also, whether or not you are thinking about it, you are feeling the inheritances of these benefits. All right, so let's talk about some Amazonianisms and some beliefs. I was going to say mechanisms, but of course that is one of them. So one of the core beliefs that we have is that good intentions are not enough. And that means that you need mechanisms. And as our distinguished engineer, Eric Brandwein, says, if it's not someone's job, then it's a hope, and a hope is not a plan. So having these scalable mechanisms really allows for your shop to be redundant, to be emboldened to get stuff done. And often we do stuff in what we call two pizza teams. So as we do development cycles, the premise here is that we have made a business decision to move fast, and that will have some pros and cons in some sense, right? So what that means is that every little team is going to know the intricacies of what they are building, but folks on the outside, even within the company, don't necessarily know. So that has security benefits, and it also has some costs. There are ways that this plays out that I think are worth thinking through, and how your organization structures is important. One of the other things that we do is we have Steve Schmidt, so my boss, the CISO, reports directly to the CEO. And this is critical because if you're going to have executive support, and by the way, if you are in a shop that does not have an established organizational structure where security is a first-class citizen, that's an issue. And I think you will continue to feel the reverberations of that issue as you develop and as you go through your life cycle of innovation or whatever your business is doing to get to your bottom line. So thinking through the ways that plays out from an organizational standpoint, another way that once you have that executive buy-in, we do blameless escalations. So every 15 minutes, things go up and they go up the chain, and your executives just have to know they're going to answer the phone for security. And that is one of the things that takes some buy-in. 100% of executives will say they care about security, but actually getting them to budget for security, I was going to say initiatives, but really it's imperatives. That is an important aspect of getting that executive buy-in. So as we go through today, I'll have a few notes on the side about some of these Amazonianisms. Take them if they work for you. There's nothing to say that this is the only way to do business. It is just that we have come up with some kind of shortcuts or ways of thinking through how we work. And these are what I'm calling Amazonianisms. Feel free to, crib whatever works for you. One of these is the decision that internally, we try to automate as much as we can away. So one of the ways this plays out is we never close a trouble ticket until we've scripted a remediation, if it can be scripted. So you should only solve the same problem once, for example. What is your team doing with the last month of trouble tickets? How are you looking at the data around which teams are running into the guardrails the most? Those kinds of questions. I think it isn't, rocket science, but it takes intentionality. And I think that ultimately, a lot of times folks are doing manually what could be automated away. And inherently, there really should be as much automation as possible so that computers take away whatever does not require human judgment. So as we think about this, we're talking about minimizing that gray area of human decision making. So your left and your right of all your things that you want to allow and things that you want to not allow should be pretty established, so you can put some preventive controls there. And then you'll have your logging and monitoring and your remediative controls that are in that gray area. And as you build up your shop, you will actually have sort of accreted a sense of, solving big problems by solving small problems. So putting some automations in place and then building upon those as you find that you can do that and sort of in line with your tolerance. So internally, for example, we keep our employee permissions very free and open, but we do a lot of logging and monitoring to ensure that we can get back to a known good state if folks go off the rails there. So there are ways that your enterprise will need to make some judgment calls around the sort of risk posture that you adopt and how you're going to minimize that gray area or where you fall in these kind of shades of gray, if you will. Ultimately, one of the big benefits of cloud is that you have access to environments on demand. So you can spin up, you can spin down, and as Melissa mentioned, you're really free to go innovate, and any enterprise at any scale can now spin up environments and spin back down. But what it also means is that you have this luxury of funneling down. So going from pre-prod through a test and dev pipeline, and having the freedom to experiment, having the freedom to, have a sandbox environment where your devs can play. But then as you get down toward production, you have a much narrower funnel toward what can happen and how much you're watching and how changes get logged and remediated and so on and so forth. So thinking through this in terms of the pipeline to production. So I put in a couple childhood photos here just for fun. This is me with one of my three brothers in Colorado, it looks like, because it's snowy. Anyway, I think one of the points that we are going to be thinking through here is how your teams do continuous learning. So it's not always obvious to a dev what guardrail they bumped up against. And that's really the security team's job to embolden them, to educate them about what they're running into, and to also make some judgment calls around, how to build those guardrails and how to move through those controls, that protective, detective, and remediative controls. One of the things that I love to point out is that, so this, if we were in a live audience, I'd say, who knows who this is? But this is Ada Lovelace. She was Lord Byron's daughter. And I think that's not a coincidence because he was a poet. And so she's really thinking in terms of how computers can do higher order work. And really up until she came along, folks had thought of computers as being this kind of linear counting machine. And maybe you could do equations with it. But they weren't thinking in terms of how to build processes and automation and sort of higher order thinking into computers. And I think it's a really beautiful tribute to think through how these kinds of foundational thinking came into play now, and especially are freed up by the kinds of interactions we can do with computers now, and especially with cloud. So one of the things that I like to challenge my CISOs with is to say, if you knew the state of everything in the world and could reason on top of the data, what problems would you solve? So in other words, just stop telling yourself, well, no, we could never find out that data. I don't know how we would get that, or it doesn't exist, or just like pretend like you are entirely freed. And then what would you do with it? What data would you want and how would you use it? Because for all intents and purposes, from a computing standpoint, you can do that. I mean, you have what feels like limitless computing on our side by using AWS. You can spin up and really have this sort of freedom. And you then can also do analytics on top of it. And this includes your security analytics. You know, sophisticated shops are having security data lakes, and they are being kind of thoughtful with the data. So it's just a challenge out there, I think, especially since security teams are often, rightly or not, considered to be sort of innovation blockers. I think it's really important to think through how your business is going to be freed and kind of emboldened by the access to resources, and then how do we have that contribute to your bottom line of whatever enterprise you're in. So one of the ways that we try to do this is, and this is a phrase that we use internally, is to make the secure thing to do the easy thing to do. So pave those roads that are, the ones that you want folks to be on, that have a lot of security built into them, and democratize down. So taking advantage of these cloud scale functionalities, and I'm going to dig into each of these a little bit now. So ephemeral architectures and templatizing, and then visibility and configuration drift detection, the ability to revert to a known good state, and to protect your backups and have a really strong, confident security posture. So just setting the stage here, as Mel mentioned, we've basically moved into a new era now where CI/CD has moved from DevOps to DevSecOps, or secure DevOps, whatever you want to call it. I know no one likes the term DevSecOps, but we don't have a better one necessarily. So this is what it would have looked like before, right? You go through a very full-fledged process. You're doing waterfall development cycles where you might be working on a 6-week or a 6-month timeline. And you bolt on security at the end, and if the build fails, you just stop. And there's a lot of halting and a lot of slowdowns. In the DevSecOps model, you're doing a lot of this continuously. And I think this is going to be some of the points that I get into today, are like the ways that you can do this in a really it's not effortless, but it is built in, right? And so it's part of how you weave it into your cycle, and how you're able to then know as you build that you have built security into what you're developing. So first incarnation of this that we'll talk about is the ability to do continuous code reviews. This is me looking over one of my other brother's shoulders as a kid. We had like one family computer. I'm sure some folks in the audience can relate to these days. This would have been, I don't know, 80s or 90s. So anyway, the ability to not have someone over your shoulder just doing your code review, but to actually have your ability to do it in an automated and continuous way. So here's an example. Code Guru can do code review. There's a lot of open source tooling that goes into this. So you can actually, as you're creating code commits, you can do a continuous validation cycle. The second one is templatizing and ephemeral architectures. I think I was in Finland in this photo, and I thought it looked like ephemerality. So that's where this comes from. So what do I mean by that? Well, so you can do validations. One of this is Access Analyzer. So this is a tool that our automated reasoning group built. So let me show you a little bit here. This is, again, if we were live, I'd say, who knows who this is, but I will give it away. So this is Euclid on the side, and because this goes back at least as far as Euclidean mathematics. You don't go out and try to count every prime number. You just accept the infinitude of primes to be true. So in that same vein, as we do mathematical proofs and we sort of accept certain things to be true mathematically, now that we have abstracted those bottom layers of the stack away from you, so you're not thinking, oh, where's the rogue thumb drive or the rogue server? You now are interacting with your environments as code. So you're doing infrastructure as code, you're doing security as code. And so you can encode policies as logical formulas. So for example, this is a IAM policy on the other side here. And if we come back to this, Access Analyzer actually will allow you to validate your identity and access management permissions, and will also flag for you paths that have not been used recently. So it will help you get to least privilege. This is the kind of thing that computers do well, because humans have a hard time parsing complex code, but computers do it, and they can run that, right? And it's effortless. So taking advantage of the ability of computers to reason about the permissions you've put in the form of code. Here's another example of it, Platformation Guard. So policy as code. This example says if there are elastic load balancers, ELBs present, ensure that ELBs have protocols specified from the allow list and certificates are not empty. So this is an example of, the capability itself is a security functionality, and then it also dictates certain security benefits, right? The fact that certificates cannot be empty, that's a security mandate. So the ability to deploy this as code means as you're building through the pipeline, you can write these into your build pipeline. Here's another example. So in AWS organizations, which is our multi-account governance architectural tool, we have what's called SCPs, so service control policies. And this is where you can, from an organizational layer, put down mandates so you can, for example, turn CloudTrail always on, which is our logging of all your API calls. You would want to do that so that no one can turn off your logging and you can analyze those API calls. Here's another example, which is to put in a service control policy that says, prevent any VPC that doesn't already have direct internet access from getting it. So again, this is both a security tool itself, this guardrail of SCPs is a security guardrail, but it also then can be used to dictate security goodnesses. So something like preventing from getting internet access. And then another tech dive, this is one indicator of just how cloud has changed the way we think about doing incident response and ensuring that we don't have an incident in production. So canaries are something just like the canary in the coal mine that folks use to validate that they have done what they think they have done and that the behaviors are going in accordance with the mandates that you have put down through your security of your architectures. So it now looks different. Canaries in the cloud mean that you can take advantage of some of the tooling that we have. So for example, Macy is a data detection service. So you can look for sensitive data. It's particularly helpful for regulated industries if they're looking for, social security numbers in a bucket to make sure that they don't have sensitive data, for example. So this is one example of being able to go through your logs and actually ensure that your logs themselves are not storing sensitive data. Again, it's a security tool, and now you're actually using it for security mandates as well. So there's multiple ways in which you have the tooling to really customize based on your industry, your risk tolerance, and the cumulative effect of all of these is that your developers get to go build without the burden of worrying about these things. Here's another example. Amazon Aurora is a managed database that we have, and you can create clones. Well, I was talking with a CISO recently who said, how do I know my last known good state? And it's interesting because that made me think about it, and that's where this came from, is sort of thinking through, well, actually, you just clone it, and then you could set those to clone automatically and then detect when there is drift. And that's when you know something has been tampered with or gone off. So thinking in terms of canaries as you construct them too, and not just as, someone might sell you a service. Finally, if these are kind of sounding ambitious or like tooling that you're not comfortable with yet, like that's fine. Start somewhere. Start hiring security folks who love to automate. We joke, but not really, that we hire lazy security engineers because we want folks who want to automate away problems, solve those big problems by solving small problems as you lead up to it, and really creating that freedom within the dev cycles. So one of our senior principal engineers, Beetle, jokes again, but not really, that there are two ways to learn incident response, and one will be chosen for you, which is to say responding to a real incident. So part of this is also just practice, right? Do your game days, do your war rooms, or whatever you call them, tabletops for executive decision making, but run through your incident response pipelines before you come to that day that you need to exercise them. And then finally, one of the really important inheritances of cloud is that you can have these abilities to have immutable architectures and to have backups and backstops, as I call them, against behaviors, because we know that things go off the rails, right? As Werner Vogels, our CTO, says, everything fails all the time. And what he means by that is that like individual components we know can fail, but what you want to do is ensure that as a whole, your customers never feel it. And so the way that you do that is to do all of the kinds of good behaviors that we've been talking about, from those protective guardrails to those detective, logging and monitoring, canaries to ensure that you've done what you think you've done, but then ultimately having the confidence that you have backstops that prevent your important data from being tampered with, and that you have backups so that you've got some vaults. This is my 1 year that I played basketball as a child, so I wouldn't put a lot of confidence in my own backstop here, but it seemed like it could work as a metaphor. So immutable storage and backups, one of the services that we have is called AWS Backup. It can do really seamless, painless backups for you. And this is an example of how to do cross-region replication using AWS Backup. You can schedule these. And then S3, write once, read many, is another one. So you can have basically a vault account for S3. You can also use things like S3 MFA delete, where you need a MFA token to be able to delete something. S3 versioning, where you're saving, just like in a doc that saves multiple versions, you're saving versions of that bucket and its contents so you can revert back to a known good state. These are really healthy ways to have confidence. And these are, AWS Backup and S3 write once, read many in particular are really helpful for things like ransomware, to ensure that you have immutable backups, that you have confidence that folks aren't going to get into your one copy and alter it or tamper it. And then another example, just as you go through daily operations, is to have those kinds of account backstops or guardrails. I talked about the SCPs, but another example of this is S3 block public access, which means that you cannot make that bucket public. You have S3 buckets can host a public facing website. So there are definitely use cases for having a public bucket. But if you know that you don't want the ability for your devs to make that mistake, you can put this control on. And this is an example of us pulling things over from the customer side of the shared responsibility model to our side. So guard duty, for example, is another one where watch your VPC flow logs for anomalies turned into us watching them for you and giving you alerting. So S3 block public access was another response to, the demand signal that we heard from customers saying, help us not make this mistake. And then also the ability to do it on our side. So if you have ideas for other things that we can or should be doing for you, bring them to me. We are building functionalities all the time, and the vast majority of the tooling and capabilities that we build are in direct response to customer demand. And you can build in your default encryption on S3 as well, ensuring you can natively encrypt across the platform and actually enforce that buckets cannot be created without being encrypted. This is what this looks like. So you've got your CloudTrail enabled, you've got your dictatorial guardrails there. And then finally, I think it's worth just remembering, like the same way that, firefighters spend most of their time preventing fires, not fighting them, right? So by the same token, your security team should be thinking about how to basically ensure that your incidents never become production issues. So that freedom, again, to experiment in that pipeline, ensure that you've put guardrailing around so that things are not going into production without going through that kind of sieve. And then meanwhile, ensuring that you've got a lot of canaries and other things that tell you that you're doing the things that you believe you're doing. And you should be able to validate that as code as you go along, as we have discussed today. But one of the big inheritances that you get from that is this confidence that even if you do have security issues, that you'll catch them in pre-prod. And I think that's really revolutionary, because it used to be that you push to prod and you pray for the best. Now it's really, you can validate that you've done what you think you've done, and hopefully you don't have those issues in production. And when you do, you quickly remediate back to a known good state using those templatized things like CloudFormation, which is our, the template where you're throwing an infrastructural set of commands up. You are actually able to templatize, go back to a known good state, take advantage of those ephemeral and immutable architectures, and really solve problems at their root. So if your web server gets popped in the cloud and you kill and spin up a new one, you haven't solved your problem, right? But having the ability to go do root cause analysis, but meanwhile keep your architecturals up and running. And finally, this is not a static area, right? Some of these functionalities I've talked about today are new. We are constantly developing internally how we do this. And we would love to hear if you come up with a system that works really well for your dev teams to weave in security. If you have mechanisms that you think are healthy, I'd love to hear your feedback on what you tried that works or that doesn't work. Here's my contact information. And like I said, I welcome your questions. We will be sticking around to take some live Q&A now. I guess I can leave it on there, but yeah, all right. That went somewhat seamlessly, hopefully. Feel free to follow up. I know there were some tech dives in there, and this is intentionally at sort of a multi-layered level.
Thank you, Merritt. This was excellent. Hold on, let's see if I can come back out of the share screen. Hold on. There we go. There we go. Are you able to see me? Oh, hold on. There we go.
I see your back. There you go.
There we go. Thank you so much, Merritt. That was an incredible masterclass. I learned so much. We're going to take a couple of questions from the audience. So for those who are participating virtually, if you haven't done so already, please feel free. This is an interactive session. Please feel free to comment or submit your questions in the Q&A. We received a few questions via email, but we also received one already within the Q&A portal that I'll go ahead and share with you, Merritt. It reads, it's from an anonymous attendee. It reads, as a business manager, not on the IT side, I often wonder what IT directors discuss with your sales engineers and or rightful representatives in order to, 1, reach a conclusion, and 2, successfully implement the solutions in transition. Can you elucidate us on how this discussion normally goes?
I'm not sure I understand that question at all. But I think that to reach a conclusion and successfully implement the solutions in transition. So, I mean, I think that what they're trying to get at is sort of what I mentioned at the start, some of these organizational challenges. I think having an organizational structure that reflects the priorities of the enterprise is really important. So having, security be a first-class citizen, as I said, or whatever you want to call it, having it be a business, validation, rather than considering it a cost center. I really think that enterprises are getting to the point where they do know that like their customers will consider the security of their enterprise to be a part of their business proposition. So it's not just like, yeah, we have to have IT, but they're just a expensive shop over there. It's like, no, this is core to what we're delivering, and security is going to be one of the things that not just auditors ask about, but that our customers ask about and that they feel the effects of. And that is all the versions of security, right? So from CIA, if you're thinking through like whether they're protecting your data and it's confidential, whether it's got integrity so it's not being tampered with, and then whether it's available, the availability element, again, is one that your customers will feel a lot. So I think if you're on the business side, I think finding ways that you can speak with and understand the security imperatives and build those into your business proposition are really healthy. And frankly, like, old school security folks from 20 years ago who kind of took pride in saying no are just not the model anymore. If you're going to be a no person, then you should just get out of the way, go find another career, because we are not tolerating that. Enterprises need to move forward. They need to find ways to get to yes. And frankly, another of these kind of Amazonian isms for us is that we refuse to kind of say it's too hard, so we're just not going to do it. So in 2002, for example, Jeff Bezos put in an API mandate, and he basically said everything needs to be an API call. And that really transformed the way that we do cloud now. And so it means that everything goes at API speed. You can write commands at the command line level. That's a huge benefit, but it does mean that every API call goes over the public internet. It's protected by SIG-V4, and there are ways that you are forced as developers and as security folks to figure out how to do it and do it securely, and to not, take no for an answer, but to find a way to get to yes.
Love it. Love everything about your answer. Thank you for the participant for submitting that. We have 3 additional questions. The first one is from Felipe Conid, and his question is, when does AWS build versus when does AWS go to their partners for security?
So internally, we do everything custom ourselves, but we have a huge partner network. So as Felipe is right to point to, if you are like an enterprise that is a cloud technology, you very likely are or should be in the Amazon marketplace. There's no like cost to enter, and you do not have to pass go and collect $200. So look into that, and it makes it really seamless for your customers to consume your services. And these can be security services, so this is whatever, Palo Alto and Dome9 and Terraform and or HashiCorp and Lacework and so on and so forth. But these are also just vendors in general that might be helpful. So there are folks who help manage containers, or like they're a really important partner plays in a lot of different arenas depending on what you're working on. So I think you're right to think through, and frankly from the security perspective, I often talk to shops that are very comfortable with something they're using today. So like Splunk for dashboarding, for example, great. You can run that on AWS. You can get visibility into your on-prem and your cloud assets. So there's a lot of freedom of choice with using the partner network. And if you are a young enterprise, like I said, I know Miami is a sort of burgeoning area. And if you are growing a tech startup and you are running a small cloud company, you should be on the Amazon Partner Network. And if you need more information about that, feel free to reach out to me directly.
Thank you, Merritt. Second question is from Pierre Craig III. And he says, hello, Ms. Baer. How is AWS developing cloud security architecture to create a holistic enterprise solution for businesses looking to implement zero trust solutions?
Zero trust, our good old buzzword. So zero, it's always kind of one of those things that zero trust is like a term of art. And I think it can be a helpful framework, right, to think through how you're going to define that. So we think of zero trust as reducing, possibly to zero, the relevance of a person or piece of software's location on the network. And what that means is that whereas, in traditional, like read, past IT approaches, you would have a lot of confidence in things that were under some kind of perimeter and very little confidence into things that were outside of that perimeter. Now we think of these as much more intertwined, right? And so you're actually going to have and this speaks to some of what I was talking about today, where you cannot just like bolt things on after the fact. You're going to weave in your identity-centric, fine-grained permissions. So things like access control lists and SCP, service control policies, these kind of guardrailing, that kind of the way that you do permissions is by writing them into the code and creating these policies that are really validatable at the code level. And then marrying those up with some of those traditional perimeter-based protections. So things like VPNs and VPCs, virtual private cloud. And ideally, these two are not just both in existence, but they are actually aware of and augmenting one another. So an example of that would be a VPC endpoint policy, where you've got the VPC doing some perimeter defense, and then at the endpoint there, where it is a point where things can come in and out, you've got fine-grained permissions that are written as code. So we think of these, of zero trust, as sort of a set of frameworks to think through how to do sophisticated security. Of course, it doesn't mean that you just like do every possible piece of security on every possible aspect, because frankly, like, this napkin is zero trust. Nothing comes in or out, but like, who cares, right? You're gonna need to have things that work. So thinking of it in terms of like Fort Knoxing everything is just not useful. But I think the idea that you do kind of intelligent permissioning, that you have it layered in a way that allows for both those kind of perimeter-based filtering out noise from your signal, and then those fine-grained identity-centric permissions that you can adjust over time. And as I've mentioned, you can reason about those using tools like Access Analyzer. So you've done what you think you've done. And then finally, you could use canaries to ensure that you are seeing the behaviors that you would expect. And so I think, as you marry all of these kind of best behaviors up, you'll end up with this very confident posture that you can call zero trust if you would like.
I love the way you explained that, especially how you said zero trust is really just to be thought of as intelligent permissioning. I love that. Next question is, this is actually a very interesting question. Why do you think security teams are often considered to be blockers to innovation?
I think because they are, some of the time, like, not that they should be, but a lot of times, the folks that I talk with who are on dev teams are frustrated because their security team is too nervous to move. They kind of say like, don't touch that. We don't know what it's connected to. And it's like, okay, but the ostrich thing doesn't work over time. I think that basically, fundamentally, I think there's a couple of factors, right? One is that, as I mentioned, security teams 20 years ago were very much the kind of no shop, and they could, in a sense, they could just like put dictatorial constraints on, and folks just kind of said, okay, fine, that's just going to be what it is. I can only use my computer in the office, and that's the way that they're going to make sure that it's secure in the corporate environment or whatever, right? These days, and look at COVID, right? A lot of enterprises were all of a sudden forced to like grow up and deal with working from home and put, security into the ways that folks work remotely. Well, you have the tools to do that, and your security team needs to be on board and figure out how to do that with things like VPNs, right? So taking advantage of these kind of like development pipelines and how they have changed over time. But one of those also means that like dev teams need to have security minded folks on them, if not explicitly security folks. So we do a certain proportion of security folks in every dev team, for example. But the other reason I think is just on the business side, where folks, I think, CISOs and security teams often think that they are less risky if they don't do anything. Like if they don't, I don't mean don't do anything, but if they don't move, if they don't take a leap. Whereas really, actually, I think often we underestimate the cost of staying in place. There's like a Paul Colo quote about the day came when the risk of staying in the bud was greater than the risk of blooming. And I think of that just like, you're paying for, literally and metaphorically paying for your security posture where you are. So if you're entirely on-prem, you're paying for the setup that you have. Is it the posture that you want? And frankly, I think that folks who get into the security profession are inherently risk averse a lot of times. It selects for people who get nervous with newness. But the challenge of today is to be a security team that is a business enabler. And, I think that old perception that security is the shop of no needs to change and is changing. And I think folks are growing up and embracing that, but I still think we have a ways to go with them really understanding that the cost of not moving. I think that we should be thinking more in terms of, like it's sort of one of those things where folks will, CISOs will come to me and they'll be like, do I move one workload or 100? Do I, it's hard to know where to start, right? And I think the answer is start somewhere. Do a meaningful workload. Do one that's high scrutiny that shows that you can really do it meaningfully and have that executive buy-in. Because if you're going to move 100 workloads, you need your executives to be the ones that say, we're going to get this done and we're going to do it on this timeline. And, frankly, the best time to move was yesterday. The second best time is today. Just like start somewhere. And your metrics too. You'll be able to then have so much more visibility, have the ability to get back to a known good state. Like I said, I actually think that folks overestimate sort of the cost from a security perspective of moving to the cloud or of moving to a more agile pipeline instead of, because you can lift and shift and you'll get some benefits in cloud because you'll have more ability to spin up and spin down, but really doing cloud native architectures, taking advantage of some of these, policies as code and the ways that I've kind of scratched the surface of today, those will really free you up and allow your security teams to be part of your dev cycles.
Excellent, excellent. For the sake of time, we're going to just take one final question. And this one's more just about you, Merritt. How do you spend most of your time in the office of the CISO?
Yeah, so I work about half and half. I work about half on internal security of AWS. So I try to make our security better to kind of chase down things that I think we could be doing better or to connect the dots. We have a lot of teams that are running really hard and fast in their own, sprints. And so finding ways to inject real world experience, because the other half of that is talking to customer CISOs and security teams and kind of relating back how I can see patterns and how we're seeing behaviors and how folks are taking advantage of tooling or the ways in which we can be an enabler for them. So I would say I spend about half the time on internal security, improving our shop, and about half my time on external, so speaking engagements like this, CISO conversations, and trying to bring some of that feedback and patterns back to our shop and vice versa, right? Taking some of what we do internally and be able to talk about that with other folks. So these worlds speak to each other, but they are a little bit distinct. And of course, AWS security is the internal shop, whereas the folks that I'm speaking with in the field, they have account teams that manage those relationships, they're field teams. So it's an interesting vantage point in an enterprise like ours, but I really like it because I think it gives me the ability to empathize a lot on both sides, to say like, yeah, that's something we work on too. And this is what we do today. If you know of a better way, please tell me.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Merritt. I'm going to turn it back over to Melissa.
Thanks, Merritt. Before we wrap up and have closing remarks, I wanted to ask you a question as well. It's a little bit more general. You are obviously very plugged into tech ecosystems around the world, right? Not just one specific one, you're a global company. but I wanted to get your thoughts, especially that you are plugged into the South Florida, Miami tech ecosystem, what your thoughts are about this acceleration and growth that South Florida has seen over the last 18 months. It could pertain to security or cloud or your company in general, or just you personally. But I'm obviously very excited about it, being born and raised here in Miami and always kind of knowing that we had all the elements to create a thriving tech ecosystem here. But based on your experience, just wanted to know what your thoughts were and how you feel about it.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I love Miami. I've really found it interesting to get a lay of the land in terms of some of the tech folks. I think that it is relevant to think about how cloud, allows you to just spin up a company. Like you don't have to know how to code. You don't have to hire a dedicated staff of 50 people. You can really do proofs of concept easily. You can experiment. You can spin up and spin down. If your business is successful, there's more available for you to consume. Like a lot of that flexibility is really core to allowing for a young tech ecosystem. And then I think that there's still a lot of room to grow. I think that we are just at the start of that curve. It's great that, the mayor has been really invested and other folks like eMerge are, solid players that have been investing in this for years. And I think we're certainly at a tipping point now where I see a lot of, growth and sort of increasing velocity in the ways that folks are getting their hands dirty in the tech ecosystem here. And I would love to see it continue to grow. I think Miami is such a foundational place and such an interesting mix of cultural and geographic and other elements that no other city has. So I would love to see it continue to grow even further. And I see a lot of promise there. I feel like we've got the seeds kind of planting, and we're gonna now need to do the watering and the sun and and grow those up.
Absolutely agreed. The foundation I think is definitely solid, and I think I agree with you wholeheartedly that the fact that it's almost like this emerging tech ecosystem now with a global lens on us, that's wherein lies the opportunity, right? Now is where we take advantage of this and leverage this momentum. And of course, you're playing a pivotal role in that as well. So Merritt, I want to give you a very special thank you for this incredible session. You're truly a dynamo and a powerhouse. I especially love the Amazonianisms. I was taking notes as you were giving your presentation. And I loved the continuous learning pictures of you and your brothers when you were younger. And, not only a boxer, but also obviously played basketball, even if it was for a day, as you said, you're an athlete, that's clear.
As long as you got a picture, it counts. So.
Got it, exactly. That means it happened. But no, seriously, thank you again. And I know that this is, we've been partners. And I know we're going to continue to collaborate on multiple fronts, and please lean on us as continued partners as well. For all of you that are on to learn more about how AWS thinks about cloud security, Ashley is going to be dropping some information in the chat, noting the webpage you can visit and a list of upcoming virtual events led by AWS. And if you've enjoyed today's masterclass, I encourage you to join us at eMerge Americas for upcoming virtual events, such as this one that we organize year-round as we lead up to our annual tech conference, which will be April 18th and 19th, 2022 at the Miami Beach Convention Center. To find out more details about our programming and our content and lineups and the latest news in tech and venture, please subscribe to our weekly newsletter called The Brief at emergeamericas.com. Merritt, thank you again. To everyone on, thank you. Ashley, thank you. And we wish everyone an amazing day and rest of the week. See you soon.
Thank
you, Merritt.
Amazing masterclass.